Prairie vole 80%. That's the number of prairie voles, Microtus ochragaster, that never look for another partner after losing the one they had. Not because they can't, not because there aren't other voles around. They just stop. Their brain chemistry shifts so hard that researchers have compared it to the most severe cases of clinical depression ever recorded in a rodent. The light behind their eyes dims, their body starts breaking down, and most of them simply fade out within weeks. And this is a field mouse. A small, round, brown rodent that weighs less than a tennis ball and lives under the grass in the American Midwest. Nothing about this animal screams romance. Nothing about the way it looks would make you think twice. But underneath that plain little body sits the most chemically intense love story that science has ever measured. Here's what happens. When a male and a female prairie vole meet and decide they like each other, they don't go on a few dates. They lock in. The bonding ritual can last over 24 hours straight. A marathon of closeness that rewires their brains in real time. During that window, something permanent clicks. The nucleus accumbens, the reward center of the brain, floods with dopamine, the exact same chemical cascade that happens in a human brain during the most intense forms of substance dependency. Same receptors, same pathways, same overwhelming pull, but it's not random. Prairie voles carry an abnormally dense concentration of oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in that reward center. Think of it as a lock and key system that most rodents simply don't have. When they touch their partner, the key turns. Dopamine pours in. And from that moment on, the vole is neurologically hooked on one specific individual. Not on a mate, on that mate. On the exact scent of their fur, the exact warmth of their body, the exact pressure of their side leaning into theirs. And the shift is instant. Before bonding, the male is calm, passive, indifferent. After bonding, he becomes a different creature. He'll sit pressed against his partner for hours, grooming her, nuzzling her, barely moving. But if an unfamiliar male wanders too close, any male, any direction, that same gentle little rodent explodes into aggression so sudden and violent it startles the researchers watching through the glass. He's not protecting territory. He's not guarding resources. He's guarding her. Now here's where the story gets strange. In biology, rodents exist at the bottom of the food chain. Everything hunts them. Owls, snakes, foxes, hawks, the list doesn't end. The evolutionary answer to that pressure is simple. Reproduce fast, reproduce often, don't get attached. Mate with as many partners as possible and flood the gene pool before something catches you. That's the rule book. That's how rodents survive. The prairie vole read that rule book and threw it in the river. This tiny animal chose emotional monogamy so deep it rivals, and often surpasses, what we see in great apes. And it didn't just happen passively. Evolution carved specific receptor densities into their brains to make the attachment stick. Their cousin, the meadow vole, Microtus pennsylvanicus, shares 99% of their DNA and couldn't care less about any partner it's ever had. The difference between a creature that loves for life and one that forgets in an hour comes down to a microscopic cluster of receptors in a brain the size of a peanut. The discovery of all this wasn't even intentional. In the 1970s, an ecologist named Lowell Getz was running routine population counts in Illinois. He wasn't studying love. He was just trapping rodents in the tall grass and writing down numbers. Standard field biology. But he kept running into a problem. His single animal traps kept catching two voles at once. The traps were narrow metal tubes designed for one small body. For two animals to trigger the mechanism together, they would have had to be walking through the pitch-black field, literally shoulder to shoulder, pressed into each other like a single creature, and it got stranger. When a trap caught only the female, the male didn't flee into the night. He sat outside the cage, in the cold, in the open, completely exposed to every predator in the county, and he waited. All night, right next to her. Until Getz came back in the morning. That observation changed everything. It launched decades of neuroscience research that eventually mapped the oxytocin pathway, explained the mechanics of pair bonding, and gave science its first chemical model for what love actually looks like inside a living brain. And then, in 2016, a study published in one of the most respected scientific journals on the planet proved something even bigger. Researchers placed a prairie vole in a mildly stressful situation in one room while its partner waited in another. When the doors opened and the stressed vole returned, its partner didn't just acknowledge it. The partner sprinted across the enclosure and began frantically licking and embracing the distressed animal, pressing its body against it, grooming it with visible urgency. Brain scans of the comforter showed something stunning. Its neural activity mirrored the pain of its partner. The same regions lit up, the same distress signals fired. The comforting vole was feeling the other's suffering. Consolation behavior driven by emotional contagion. Before that study, science believed that capacity belonged exclusively to humans and higher primates. A field mouse proved them wrong. TD monkey 0%. That's not a rounded number. That's the actual confirmed, genetically verified rate of reproductive infidelity in wild TD monkeys, Calicebus. Across every population ever sampled, every DNA test ever run, every paternity analysis ever conducted in the canopy, the number is the same. 0. These animals do not cheat. Not occasionally, not rarely, not almost never. The answer is 0, and it has been 0 every single time anyone has checked, which is already unusual. But the reason they stay loyal isn't moral, it's mechanical. And it starts with their tails. If a pair of TT monkeys sits on a branch, the very first thing they do is reach for each other's tail. They grab the long, soft fur-covered tails and braid them together like a single rope. They sleep braided. They eat braided. They watch the forest braided. The tails wrap so tightly around each other that, from a distance, researchers sometimes can't tell where one animal ends and the other begins. This isn't decoration. The tail of a TD monkey is densely packed with mechanoreceptors, pressure-sensitive nerve endings wired directly to the parasympathetic nervous system. When they braid and squeeze, the sustained pressure activates what's essentially a biological off switch for fear. The amygdala, the brain's panic center, goes quiet. Oxytocin floods the system. Their heart rate drops. Their cortisol plummets. The partner's tail is functioning in every measurable way as an anxiety medication delivered through physical contact, and the dependency on that contact is absolute. A primatologist ran a clean, simple experiment. He placed a bonded pair of TT monkeys in 2 cages, side by side, separated by nothing more than a transparent acrylic panel. They could see each other perfectly. Every detail, every expression, inches apart. But they couldn't touch the tails. Both animals went into what the monitors registered as the equivalent of a full-blown panic episode. Heart rates spiked to dangerous levels. Cortisol flooded their bloodstream. They paced. They vocalized. They pressed against the barrier. All of this, because of a few inches of plastic. The moment the panel was removed, they lunged toward each other, braided their tails, and within 10 seconds, both heart rates dropped from chaos to resting calm. The monitor showed something the researchers hadn't expected to find. Their heartbeats synchronized. Not approximately, not close to each other. The 2 hearts locked into the exact same rhythm, beating at the same frequency, at the same millisecond intervals, like 2 clocks reset by the same hand. Cardiac coupling. Through a tail. Now here's the part that breaks the pattern of every primate textbook ever written. In this species, it's the father who does almost everything. The male carries the infant on his back for roughly 90% of the time during the first months of life. He navigates the dark canopy at night, leaps between branches, watches for threats, all with a screaming baby clinging to his shoulders. He hands the newborn to the mother for a few short minutes, strictly for nursing, and the moment feeding is done, he takes the child back. Every time, no exceptions. Among small primates, the survival rule is scatter. When a hawk appears, each animal bolts in a different direction to split the predator's attention. It's mathematically smart, it works. But TT monkeys do the opposite. When danger appears, they run toward each other. They find the partner, braid the tails, and face the threat together, sacrificing their own escape speed, their own chance of getting away, for the simple act of not being apart when something terrible happens. The tail isn't a convenience, it's a lifeline, and they'd rather hold it and face whatever comes than let go and face it alone. Owl monkey. Somewhere in the Amazon basin, right now, in total darkness, a small monkey the size of a house cat is carrying someone else's weight on his back. The owl monkey, Iotis, is the only truly nocturnal monkey on Earth. They gave up daylight entirely. Their eyes ballooned into enormous dark orbs that swallowed most of the color spectrum to capture whatever faint glow the canopy lets through. They can't see red. They can't see green. Their world is a narrow band of grays and blues, filtered through leaves and moonlight. And in that darkness, they built something that the rest of the primate order, with all its intelligence, all its social complexity, all its brightly lit political drama, never managed to figure out. They built quiet, stable, unbreakable marriages. This matters because of what primates are. The primate order is, bluntly, one of the most socially chaotic branches of the mammalian tree. It runs on dominance hierarchies, resource hoarding, violent takeovers, and, in many species, systematic elimination of another male's offspring by incoming rivals. That's the water these animals swim in. That's the world the owl monkey was born into, and it said no, in a canopy so dark that no one would ever see them stray, or where anonymity is total and accountability is zero. Owl monkeys chose monogamy so strict that modern genetic testing can't find a single crack. The extra-pair paternity rate in wild populations is exactly 0%. Not low, not negligible, zero. Two small primates in the dark, surrounded by every evolutionary incentive to cheat. And the answer across every study, every forest, every population is, they don't. The way they stay connected in the dark is through scent. Both partners carry active subcaudal glands, scent-producing organs near the base of the tail. Every night in the nest, they actively rub their bodies against each other, smearing their oils, mixing their chemicals, layering scent upon scent until each animal is wrapped in what's essentially an olfactory blanket made of the other. In a world without color, without sharp vision, without reliable light, the smell of your partner becomes your anchor. It's not just recognition, it's identity. It's safety. It's the one thing in the pitch-black canopy that tells you, I'm not alone. A research project in Formosa, Argentina, tracked these monkeys for 18 consecutive years. 18 years of data. And the conclusion was clean and direct. Loyalty pays. Pairs that stayed together for extended periods produced up to 25% more surviving offspring than any alternative strategy. The math was brutal in its simplicity. Stable, affectionate partnerships generated stronger, healthier young that lived longer and reproduced more successfully. Love, measured in cold genetic output, outperformed every form of selfish reproduction the forest had to offer. But the moment that crystallized what these animals really are didn't come from data. It came from a camera trap in the dark. A young, aggressive male, bigger, stronger, visibly dominant, found the territory of an older, smaller pair and attacked. He went straight for the resident male, the aging father, the quiet partner who'd been carrying babies on his back for years. The playbook of primate biology is clear here. The female watches, the stronger male wins, and she accepts the new victor because his genes promise better offspring. That's how it works. That's how it has always worked across dozens of primate species. The female didn't watch. She launched herself onto the back of the invader. Teeth and claws, all of them tiny, all of them inadequate against a bigger body, dug into the intruder's shoulders. Her partner, bruised and cornered, rallied. They fought together, side by side, two small bodies against one large one. And the intruder left. The older pair stayed. The memories outweighed the muscle. The years outweighed the genes. Somewhere deep in the primate order, underneath all the noise and the hierarchy and the violence, a small nocturnal monkey figured out that the most powerful evolutionary strategy on the planet isn't strength, or speed, or dominance. It's showing up every night with someone else's weight on your back. Seahorse, every single morning. No exceptions. A pair of seahorses, hippocampus, wakes up in the reef, abandons whatever they were doing, finds each other, and dances. They change colors. They interlock their prehensile tails like two people holding hands. And then they spin, slowly, deliberately, in perfect unison, for nearly an hour. Not to mate, not to signal territory, not for any obvious biological reason that any marine biologist has been able to pin down. They just dance, every day. Because apparently, for a seahorse, love is not something you feel once and file away. It's something you rehearse before breakfast. The reef around them is chaos. Currents smash against the coral, moray eels patrol the crevices, parrotfish grind rock into sand with their teeth, and in the middle of all of it, two small, bony creatures that could be swallowed in a single bite choose to spend the first hour of every day doing absolutely nothing productive. just swaying together in the water like they have nowhere else to be. Now, when it's actually time to reproduce, the ritual shifts into something else entirely. The preparatory courtship dances before the final mating event last an exhausting 9 hours. 9 straight hours of synchronized movement. No breaks. No pauses. No rest. That's not a typo, and it's not a rough estimate. Researchers have clocked it with stopwatches. 9 hours of 2 animals adjusting the angle of their bodies, matching the rhythm of their fins, circling and mirroring until some invisible internal clock tells them the alignment is right. And here's why those 9 hours matter. Recent studies in marine ethology and gene expression analysis revealed that the dance is not just a bonding exercise. It's a biological calibration tool. When the female watches the male's pouch swell over the course of the dance, physically watching the changes in his body. Through her eyes, the visual input triggers a precise neurohormonal cascade in her own body. Her ovulation timing adjusts microscopically to synchronize with the exact moment his pouch will be ready to receive eggs. The dance is a wireless hormonal signal. She's reading his body like a broadcast, and her reproductive system is tuning itself in real time to match his schedule. Because in this species, the schedule is his problem. The male seahorse doesn't just help out with the pregnancy. He is the one who gets pregnant, and not in some simplified pouch-carrying way. The tissue inside his brood pouch swells during mating, generating dense networks of highly oxygenated capillaries that form a true biological placenta. He absorbs fetal waste. He transfers calcium from his own bone reserves to feed the developing embryos. His body endures real contractions, rhythmic, muscular, painful, to push out the young when the time comes. Hundreds of them, sometimes over 1,000. The female, meanwhile, is free. She doesn't carry. She doesn't deliver. She doesn't sacrifice bone density or caloric reserves for the pregnancy. In a natural world that almost universally crushes females with the brutal physical toll of gestation, the seahorse quietly flipped the entire system on its back. The father carries the weight. The father pays the cost. The mother watches and waits, and dances with him every morning to make sure he knows. She's still there, the marine biologist who understands this species better than anyone on the planet, documented the moment that made her believe these bonds are real. A severe tropical storm tore through the reef she had been studying in Australia. It overturned the seabed, ripped out the vegetation, shattered the coral structures. The underwater landscape was unrecognizable. She assumed the pairs she'd been tracking for months were gone, scattered, lost, probably never to find each other again. The next morning, in murky, debris-filled water, she found her pair. They had navigated blindly through the destruction, past broken coral and displaced sand, to locate a single jagged piece of reef that was still standing. And they were there, tails intertwined, swaying together, performing their morning dance in the wreckage like it was any other Tuesday. The storm wrecked the reef. It didn't wreck the routine. Gibbon. The great apes are not a peaceful family. Chimpanzees wage territorial wars. Gorillas maintain harems enforced by physical dominance. Orangutans are largely solitary and prone to aggressive encounters. The branch of the primate tree that includes humanity's closest relatives is, by any fair reading, a theater of power struggles, social manipulation, and reproductive violence. That's the neighborhood the gibbon, Hylobatidae, grew up in. And then there's the gibbon, the smallest of the apes, the one nobody writes epic documentaries about, the one that looks like a gangly, long-armed, fur-covered gymnast hanging from a vine. It's the only monogamous ape on Earth. Every morning, at the top of the tallest trees in Southeast Asia, a pair of gibbons sits together and sings. The female opens with the Great Call, a piercing, escalating vocal sequence that cuts through the humid fog like a siren. The male weaves his own melody into the gaps, layering his voice under and around hers, filling the spaces between her notes with harmonic counterpoints. The duet lasts 20 to 30 minutes non-stop, and it carries for miles through the canopy. Every neighboring group in the forest hears it. Every potential rival, every unmated male, every predator, all of them receive the same broadcast. This territory is taken. And the two voices singing are one unit. But the duet is more than a territorial announcement. It's a daily diagnostic. Researchers using computational models track the rhythmic accuracy of these duets over time, and what they found changes the way you hear the singing. When the male rushes a note, stumbles over the timing, or clips the female's phrase, When the rhythmic sync breaks, even slightly, those acoustic failures correlate directly with relationship instability. Pairs with sloppy duets are more likely to split. Pairs with tight synchronized performances stay together longer. The female is listening. Not just hearing, listening. And what she hears tells her whether this partnership is still worth her life. They spend roughly a quarter to a third of their waking hours grooming each other. Sitting in the canopy, carefully picking through each other's fur, removing parasites, massaging the skin. A quarter of the day. In a world where calories are scarce and foraging takes effort, these animals voluntarily sacrifice significant feeding time to sit still and touch each other. Not because they're infested, because the grooming is the relationship. The contact is the currency. The fingers moving through the fur are saying what the song says every morning. I'm still here. I still choose this. The most striking proof of what the song means came not from the wild, but from rescue sanctuaries in Indonesia. When bonded pairs of gibbons seized from the illegal wildlife trade are brought in for rehabilitation, veterinary protocols sometimes require temporary separation. Different enclosures, different buildings, sometimes different wings of the facility. Both animals go silent, not quiet, silent. The great call, the enormous, forest-shaking vocal performance that defines them as a species, simply stops. For weeks, for months. The handlers describe it as watching something essential drain out of the animal. They eat less. They move less. They sit on the highest perch and stare in the direction of the other enclosure, and they don't make a sound. Then the gate opens. They don't run to each other first. They don't embrace. The first thing they do is climb. Both of them simultaneously racing to the highest point in the shared space. And then, from the top of the canopy, they open their mouths and release a duet so loud, so sustained, so overwhelmingly complete that the staff at the sanctuary has described it as feeling like a physical event. 40 minutes, without stopping. Two voices that had been silent for months, filling the forest with a sound that has only one possible translation. They don't sing alone. That's not what the song is for. Red-crowned crane, 60 years. Same partner. The red-crowned crane, Grus japonensis, can live past 60 in the wild. Some estimates push toward 70. And in nearly every documented case, they spend that entire span, decade after decade after decade, with the same individual. Not because they're trapped. Not because the options are limited. They're enormous, powerful birds with a wingspan over 8 feet. They migrate thousands of miles. They have every opportunity to find someone new every season. They just don't. What they do instead is dance, not during mating season, not when hormones are running high and the biological imperative demands performance. They dance in the dead of winter, when the snow is thick, when the temperatures are brutal, when every calorie in their body should be hoarded in absolute stillness to avoid hypothermia. The ecological rules of survival in sub-zero environments are simple. Don't move unless you must. Every gram of fat burned is a gram you can't get back until spring. The cranes ignore this completely. Old pairs, birds that have been together for 20, 30, 40 years, rise from the frozen marsh and begin. They throw their heads back, they leap. They spread their wings in synchronized arcs. They pick up sticks and toss them in the air and catch them. They bow to each other, they circle, they spring upward in explosive vertical jumps that send powder snow erupting around their feet. There is no reproductive purpose. There is no territorial message. The nesting season is months away. The eggs don't exist yet. They are two elderly birds standing in the coldest landscape on the continent, burning precious fat reserves for no reason that thermodynamics can justify. They're doing it because they want to. The instrument they use to communicate the depth of that bond is hidden inside their chest. The red-crowned crane has one of the most bizarre anatomical features in the bird world. A massively elongated trachea that coils and loops inside the hollow cavity of the sternum bone. The windpipe literally spirals through the rib cage like a brass instrument packed into a case. And when air moves through that coiled tube, it resonates with the acoustic properties of a concert trombone. The calls they produce are among the deepest, most penetrating sounds in the avian world. Low, thundering notes that roll across frozen tundra and bounce off cloud ceilings for miles. Mated pairs perform these calls together. And here's where the research gets extraordinary. Bioacoustic studies using spectral analysis compared the vocal performances of newly paired cranes with those of couples that had been together for decades. The young pairs were messy. Their timing was off. One bird would start a beat too early, the other would clip a note. The harmonic overlap was rough and imprecise. They sounded like two musicians who hadn't rehearsed. The old pairs were flawless. After years, decades of singing together, the rough edges had been filed away. The timing locked in, the frequencies aligned. Two separate windpipes coiled inside two separate rib cages, producing two separate streams of sound that merged into a single harmonic output so precise that acoustic software struggled to identify where one voice ended and the other began. They had practiced the same song, with the same partner for so long that their bodies had literally tuned themselves to each other. Time sculpts the sound, and the sound tells you everything. On the frozen island of Hokkaido, park rangers tracked a flock preparing for seasonal migration before the worst of winter set in. One female struck overhead power lines and shattered her wing. She couldn't fly. Without the ability to migrate, she would be stranded in the open cold for 6 months, exposed to temperatures that routinely claim animals twice her size. Her partner watched the rest of the flock lift off. Hundreds of birds, climbing into the gray sky, heading south toward warmer ground, toward food, toward survival. Every instinct in his body, millions of years of migratory programming, told him to follow. He took off. He gained altitude. He banked south, and then he turned around. He landed next to her in the snow, and he stayed. 6 months on foot, in Siberian winter, with a bird that couldn't fly, in a landscape that gives nothing for free. The flock disappeared over the mountains. He didn't watch them go. He was already looking at her. Beaver, 850 meters long, visible from orbit. That's the largest dam ever built by a single beaver family. It sits in northern Alberta, Canada, deep in boreal forest so remote that nobody even knew it existed until satellite imaging picked it up in 2007. Generations of the same bloodline. Parents, children, grandchildren, stacking logs, packing mud, chewing through tree trunks with their teeth year after year after year, building something so enormous that astronauts can see it when they look down at the planet. And the whole thing exists for one reason: so the front door stays underwater. A beaver, Castor canadensis, doesn't build a dam because it likes engineering. It builds a dam because it needs the water level to rise high enough to submerge the entrance to its lodge, the dome-shaped mound of branches and mud where the family sleeps, eats, and raises its young. If the door is above water, a wolf can walk in, a coyote can crawl in, a bear can rip it open. But if the door is 4 feet below the surface of a frozen pond, nothing gets in. Nothing. The family sleeps in a warm, dry chamber above the waterline, breathing through a ventilation hole in the roof, while the entire hostile world is locked out by physics. To make that happen, a mated pair of beavers will reshape the geography of an entire valley. They fell trees, not small ones, full-grown aspens and willows, gnawed through at the base with incisors that never stopped growing. They dragged the logs into the current. They packed the gaps with mud, stones, and plant matter. They divert streams. They flood meadows. They turn dry land into ponds and ponds into lakes. A single pair, working together, can alter the hydrology of a landscape more dramatically than any animal on Earth except humans. And they do all of this while being one of the most hunted animals in North America. Rodents survive by being small, quiet, and invisible. That's the rule. Hide. Don't attract attention. Move at night and leave no trace. The beaver takes that rule and builds a massive, noisy, unmistakable monument in the middle of the forest that announces exactly where it lives to every predator within miles. It's the biological equivalent of painting a target on your house because you'd rather have a strong house than a hidden one. The glue that holds the partnership together, literally, there is a substance called castoreum. Glands at the base of the tail secrete a thick, oily paste that smells, bizarrely, like warm vanilla. In the dark interior of the lodge, the pair spends hours every night rubbing this oil into each other's fur. The purpose is partly waterproofing. Wet fur in freezing water is a fast way to lose body heat, but the deeper function is chemical. By massaging their oils together, they blend their individual scent profiles into a single, unified family perfume. The walls of the lodge absorb it. The entrance tunnel reeks of it. Any animal that approaches smells not two individuals, but one fused chemical identity. The home doesn't just keep the cold out, it smells like the marriage, and when that marriage ends, the architecture falls apart. Conservation biologists studying beaver behavior documented a pattern they called structural depression. When one partner in a bonded pair is lost, taken by a predator, caught in a trap, simply gone one morning, the surviving beaver doesn't rebuild. It doesn't find a new mate and start over. It enters a state that researchers describe as apathetic torpor, the most fundamental instinct a beaver has, the one thing hardwired into every cell of its brain. The behavior it will perform even when sick, even when starving, even when exhausted, is to respond to the sound of running water. That sound means the dam is leaking. That sound means the door is exposed. That sound means everything the family built is failing. The grieving beaver hears the water, and it does nothing. It sits in the lodge. It ignores the leak. It stops repairing the logs. And slowly, over days and weeks, the dam they built together, the structure that reshaped the valley, that flooded the meadow, that kept the family safe for years, comes apart. The water drains. The pond shrinks. The door rises above the surface. And the beaver stays inside, in a home that no longer works, because the thing that made it worth building isn't there anymore. A lodge without a partner is just a pile of sticks. Great hornbill. She walks in, and then she seals the door shut behind her. The great hornbill, Buceros bicornis, is one of the largest birds in the Asian canopy, nearly 4 feet long, with a massive curved beak topped by a hollow casque that makes it look like something borrowed from the age of dinosaurs. It dominates the treetops. It flies with slow, heavy wing beats that you can hear from hundreds of yards away. It is, by every measure, a creature built for freedom, and every breeding season the female gives it all up. She finds a deep cavity in an enormous tree, a natural hollow, often high above the forest floor. She climbs inside, and then, together with her mate, she begins to wall herself in. They collect mud, clay, bark, droppings, whatever adhesive material the forest provides, and she plasters it across the entrance from the inside, while he reinforces it from the outside. Layer after layer, until the opening is almost entirely sealed. What's left is a slit, a narrow vertical crack barely wide enough to fit the tip of her beak through. Then she drops her flight feathers. This isn't a metaphor. She physically sheds the feathers she needs to fly. They fall to the floor of the cavity like discarded tools. From this moment, even if the wall came down, she couldn't leave. She is grounded, confined in total darkness, pressed into a space barely large enough to turn around in, with her eggs beneath her and the entire outside world reduced to a sliver of light through a crack in dried mud. She will stay there for 120 days. Everything, every calorie, every drop of water, every nutrient that keeps her and the chicks alive, comes from one source: him. The male becomes a flying supply line. 5 to 6 times a day, every single day. For 4 months, he launches from a branch and flies deep into the forest to forage. His esophagus stretches elastically to store up to 60 fruits at a time without digesting them, bypassing his own stomach acid to keep them clean. He flies back to the tree, lands on the trunk, and regurgitates the fruits one by one through the slit in the wall with surgical precision. His massive beak, which looks absurdly oversized and impractical, turns out to be the perfect delivery instrument, a pair of fine-tipped tweezers that can angle a single berry through a gap the width of 2 fingers. He does this while losing significant body weight. The physical toll on the male during nesting season is severe. He's flying farther, carrying more, eating less, and doing it on a schedule that doesn't allow for bad days. If he gets injured, if he gets lost, if he simply doesn't show up, she and the chicks have no way out. They can't break the wall. They can't fly. They sit in the dark and wait for food that isn't coming. The level of trust required for this arrangement is difficult to overstate. She has voluntarily surrendered every advantage she has: flight, mobility, vision, the ability to feed herself, on the belief that one specific individual will show up 6 times a day for 4 months, without fail. That's not instinct, that's a bet, and she makes it with her life, but she doesn't make it blindly. Field researchers in Thailand documented what they've called mud audits during the courtship phase. Before a female agrees to enter the cavity, there's a tense engagement period that lasts several days. The male flies to the riverbank, collects clay, and applies it to the tree cavity in her presence. She inspects it. She tests the consistency of the dried surface. She evaluates the thickness, the coverage, the structural integrity of his work. And if the construction doesn't meet her standards, if the mud is uneven, if the application is sloppy, if she perceives that he cut corners or didn't put in the effort, she rejects him. She flies away. The engagement is over. She won't hand her life to someone who can't build a wall. The most remarkable thing about this system isn't the imprisonment. It's what happens when the system breaks. In the forests of Thailand, a renowned conservationist documented a case where the providing male was taken down by poachers during nesting season. The female and chicks were sealed inside the tree with no food source. They would have been gone within days. But something unexpected happened. Unrelated bachelor males, neighbors with no genetic stake, no mating opportunity, no biological incentive of any kind, noticed the empty perch. And they stepped in. These single males began making the daily supply runs to the sealed cavity. They flew the miles, gathered the fruit, delivered it through the slit, and kept the widow and her chicks fed until she was strong enough to break through the wall on her own. No one taught them to do that. No gene benefits from it. They just did it. Bald eagle, 2,000 pounds of sticks, balanced on a single tree, accumulated over decades by a couple that never separated. The largest bald eagle, Haliaeetus leucocephalus, nest ever measured sat in a cypress tree in Florida. It was over 9 feet across and nearly 20 feet deep. It weighed more than a small car. Year after year, the same pair returned to the same tree, adding new branches, reinforcing the old ones, layering the interior with soft grasses and moss. The nest wasn't a seasonal project. It was a multi-generational home, built and rebuilt by partners who came back to each other every single year until one of them didn't. But the nest is the quiet part. The loud part happens in the sky. Bald eagles don't propose with songs or dances or gifts. They propose with a trust exercise that involves terminal velocity and the possibility of not surviving the afternoon. It's called the cartwheel display. A male and a female climb to extreme altitude, thousands of feet above the ground, where the air is thin and the wind is vicious. They face each other, they extend their talons, and they lock on. Claw to claw, grip to grip. Two apex predators whose entire evolutionary identity is built on total aerial control, and they fold their wings. They fall. Together, locked, spinning, they enter a spiraling free fall toward the earth. The trees get closer. The ground gets real. The wind screams past them as they rotate like a single object thrown from the edge of space. And they hold on. They look at each other. The science on this is specific. The eye contact is sustained throughout the spiral. And they wait. The release has to be simultaneous. And this is where the anatomy matters. Bald eagles have a tendon-locking mechanism in their feet called a ratchet system. It's the same adaptation that lets them carry heavy fish for miles without muscular fatigue. The tendons click into a locked position, and the grip holds without effort. It's involuntary. Once the talons close around something, they stay closed unless the bird actively, consciously relaxes a specific set of neural signals to release the lock. During the cartwheel display, both birds' ratchet systems are engaged. Their talons are locked together, and unlocking requires calm. Not effort, calm. The neurological signal that releases the grip is tied to the parasympathetic system, the same network that controls rest and relaxation. If one bird panics, if the adrenaline spikes too hard, if the fear response overwhelms the voluntary control, the talons don't open. They stay locked, and both birds hit the ground together. So the test isn't about strength. It's about composure. Two animals falling out of the sky, claws interlocked, each one trusting that the other will stay calm enough to let go at exactly the right fraction of a second. Not a moment too early. That looks like cowardice, and the courtship fails. Not a moment too late. That ends badly for both of them. Behavioral researchers studying this display analyzed the physiological stress data and found something hidden in the fall. The extreme gravitational forces generated during the spiral, the rotation, the speed, the sudden deceleration as they pull apart, create a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline in both birds simultaneously. The same hormones, the same intensity, the same timing. Their stress responses sync during the fall, and scientists believe this chemical alignment functions as a compatibility test. If their stress systems don't match, If one panics while the other stays steady, the partnership won't survive the demands of the breeding season. The cartwheel doesn't just look dramatic. It's a cardiac stress test for a marriage, and sometimes they fail it. Wildlife rescue centers and veterinary hospitals across the United States have documented cases where the math goes wrong. The spiral lasts too long. The altitude runs out. The pair crashes into forest canopy, into open fields, into suburban backyards, into golf courses. Emergency responders arrive to find two enormous birds of prey, injured, disoriented, feathers bent and broken, lying on the ground in a tangle of wings and talons, and the talons are still locked. Veterinarians have reported that even after impact, even after broken bones and visible trauma, the eagles refuse to release each other's grip. They lie there, on the ground, in the middle of a parking lot or a soccer field, claws interlocked, staring at each other, while humans in uniforms try to figure out how to separate two birds that would rather crash than let go. They fell out of the sky holding hands, and they didn't stop. Anglerfish. In 1922, an Icelandic biologist named Bjarni Samundsson pulled a deep-sea anglerfish out of the North Atlantic and made a discovery that moved him. The enormous female, grotesque, fanged, with a bioluminescent lure dangling from her forehead, had two tiny fish fused to her belly. They were small, smooth, and attached so firmly they seemed to grow out of her skin. Samundsson published an emotional paper announcing he had found the most devoted mother in the ocean, a deep-sea fish that carried her babies on her body. It took the scientific community several years to look closer. The babies had mature reproductive organs. They weren't her children. They were her husband's. The deep-sea anglerfish, Charatioidae, lives in a world that has no rules you would recognize. Below 1,000 meters, the ocean is absolute blackness. No sunlight, no landmarks, no sound that carries meaning. The pressure would crush a submarine. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and living things are so spread out across such incomprehensible volumes of empty water that the chance of any two members of the same species finding each other in a lifetime is close to zero. So, when a male anglerfish, and who is tiny, sometimes no bigger than a fingernail, detects the faintest chemical trace of a female drifting through the dark, he doesn't court her. He doesn't dance. He doesn't sing. He bites her. He latches onto her belly and secretes an enzyme that dissolves the boundary between his mouth and her skin. His lips melt into her flesh. Her tissue grows over his face. Their circulatory systems merge. His blood becomes her blood. Her oxygen becomes his oxygen. Over the following weeks, his eyes dissolve. His digestive system shuts down. His brain shrinks to almost nothing. His entire body's every organ, every structure, every feature that once made him a distinct living creature, wastes away until he is nothing but a small bump on her body containing one functioning component: his reproductive cells. He is reduced to roughly 1% of his original mass, a living organ, permanently fused, fed by her bloodstream, available whenever she needs to reproduce. Some females carry up to 8 of these fused males on their bodies at once. 8 former individuals, each one absorbed, each one dissolved, each one reduced to a biological function grafted onto her skin. This looks, to human eyes, like the most disturbing thing in the ocean. And by human standards, it probably is. But in the pitch-black math of the deep sea, this is the most successful reproductive strategy ever devised. In an environment where finding a partner is a near miracle, and losing one means spending the rest of your life alone in freezing darkness, the anglerfish solved the problem permanently. You don't lose what you absorb. You don't get separated from what's fused into your body. The commitment isn't emotional. It's cellular. It's architectural. It's written into the tissue and the biological. Cost of making it work is staggering. A landmark genetic study published in 2020 analyzed the DNA of these fish and sent shockwaves through immunology, a field that has nothing to do with romance. The researchers discovered that deep-sea anglerfish have completely eliminated their adaptive immune system. The T cells and B cells, the two pillars that protect virtually every vertebrate on Earth from infection, disease, and foreign tissue, are gone. Deleted from the genome. Not suppressed, not weakened, erased. The reason is simple and profound. In any normal vertebrate, if foreign tissue fuses with your body, your immune system treats it as an invader and attacks it. Organ transplant patients take immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their lives to prevent rejection. The anglerfish couldn't take drugs, So evolution removed the entire system instead. These fish gave up the biological machinery that keeps every other vertebrate alive, the ability to fight infection, to reject foreign cells, to defend against disease, because that same machinery would have destroyed the one thing they needed more than immunity, a partner. They dismantled their own defenses so they could hold on without their body trying to push the other away. Venus flower basket. Shrimp, the Japanese call it dokatsuebi, shrimp, sharing the same tomb, deep in the cold Pacific, anchored to the ocean floor in the kind of darkness that doesn't have a bottom. There is a creature that looks like it was designed by a glassblower having a fever dream. The Venus flower basket, Euplectella aspergillum, is a sponge, a cylindrical lattice of pure biological glass, woven from silica fibers thinner than a human hair, arranged in geometric patterns so precise that materials scientists have studied them for engineering applications. It glows faintly in the deep. Bioluminescent bacteria colonize the glass, giving the structure a faint ethereal shimmer in the surrounding blackness. It looks like a lantern left on the seafloor by something that forgot to come back for it. And inside that lantern, 2 shrimp are spending the rest of their lives. The species is Spongicola japonica, a tiny, translucent crustacean. During its larval stage, when it's still microscopic, a male and a female drift through the ocean currents and enter the sponge through its porous glass walls. The holes are large enough for larvae to pass through. The shrimp settle inside the hollow cavity, find each other, and begin to grow. They eat. They mature. Their bodies expand. And at some point, quietly, irreversibly, they become too large to fit back through the pores. That's it. That's the moment. There's no decision, no ceremony, no dramatic gesture. They simply grew past the exit. And from that day forward, they will live inside that glass cage together, never leaving, never separating, never seeing the open ocean again. For the rest of their natural lives, the sponge provides protection. Nothing in the deep can break through the silica lattice. In return, the shrimp function as permanent maintenance workers. Their small, translucent claws pick and scrape constantly, cleaning the detritus that would otherwise clog the sponge's pores and choke its water flow. The partnership is mutualistic. The sponge gives them a fortress. They give the sponge clean plumbing, and neither can leave. The fidelity rate of this arrangement is 100%, not because they choose loyalty, because they physically cannot choose anything else. Separation is structurally impossible. The glass walls are the vow. The geometry is the contract. No other animal on the planet has a divorce rate of exactly 0 for the simple reason that no other animal on the planet is architecturally locked inside its own wedding. Recent studies in fluid dynamics revealed something hidden in the sponge's design. The geometric angles of the glass lattice aren't random. They create specific vortex patterns that channel water currents inward, directing oxygen-rich flow toward the center of the cavity. The sponge doesn't just protect the pair, it breathes for them. The architecture actively funnels fresh water across their faces, keeping them alive and oxygenated in a part of the ocean where stillness means suffocation. The prison was designed to keep its inmates breathing. For centuries, Japanese deep-sea divers pulled these sponges from the ocean floor and found, inside everyone, the dried remains of 2 small shrimp, curled together, claws interlocked, preserved in the glass like insects in amber. The image became sacred. In feudal Japan, the skeleton of the Venus flower basket, with its 2 eternal prisoners visible through the lattice, became the most coveted wedding gift among the aristocracy. It was presented at the altar as a physical proof, not a metaphor, not a poem, not a wish, but an actual, tangible artifact of 2 creatures that entered a bond they could never break. They named it well. 2 shrimp, 1 tomb, no way out, and they're still in there. Emperor penguin, -50 degrees Celsius, winds clocking 200 kilometers per hour, darkness that lasts 24 hours a day for months. And in the middle of it, standing motionless on the ice, a male emperor penguin, Aptenodytes forsteri, balances a single egg on top of his feet and waits. He will wait for 115 days. No food, no shelter, no movement beyond the slow mechanical shuffle of the huddle. He left the ocean, his only food source, over 2 months ago, marching inland across the ice sheet in total darkness to reach the breeding colony. His partner laid the egg, transferred it to his feet in a maneuver so delicate it borders on surgical, and then turned around and walked back toward the sea to feed. She won't return for months. The egg transfer is the moment everything hangs on. And it is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. The female holds the egg on her feet, tucked under a fold of warm skin. The male positions himself directly in front of her. She rolls the egg forward. He receives it onto his own feet. The handoff takes seconds, and if the egg touches the ice, if it slips, if it rolls, if a gust of wind catches it at the wrong angle, the embryo freezes in roughly 10 seconds. At those temperatures, there is no margin, no second try, no recovery. When it goes wrong, and it does go wrong, the aftermath is one of the most psychologically disturbing behaviors documented in Antarctic biology. The male, unable to process the loss, enters a state that researchers describe as denial. He searches the ice around him. He picks up a smooth stone or a rounded chunk of ice polished by the wind and places it on his feet. He tucks it under his brood pouch, and he stands there, in the howling dark, protecting and incubating a piece of frozen rock for up to 60 days. He starves for it. He shelters it from the wind. He rotates it with the same careful movements he would use for a living embryo. He cannot accept that the thing he promised to protect is gone. The males that still carry living eggs survive the winter through a behavior so precise that physicists, not biologists, physicists have studied its mechanics. The huddle. Thousands of males packed together in a tight formation, shoulder to shoulder, bodies pressed so close that individual movement is nearly impossible. From above, it looks like a single dark mass on the white ice, but it's not static. It moves. Every 30 to 60 seconds, a wave passes through the group. One bird shifts. The bird next to it adjusts. The adjustment propagates outward in a ripple that travels through the entire colony, like a pulse through a living organism. Thermal engineers analyzed the pattern and found that it operates on strict mathematical oscillations, not random shuffling, not individual decisions, but synchronized, predictable, fluid dynamic waves that distribute heat evenly across thousands of bodies. The huddle functions as a single thermoregulatory system, a macroorganism made of fathers. When the female returns from the sea, months later, fat and fed and carrying a stomach full of fish to regurgitate for the chick, she faces a problem that seems unsolvable. The colony contains hundreds of thousands of birds. They all look identical. They all sound, to the human ear, exactly the same. And she needs to find one specific male in the middle of that wall of noise and feathers. She can, because his voice is unique in a way that no other bird's voice is. The emperor penguin's syrinx, the vocal organ, at the base of the trachea, splits airflow into two independent channels that vibrate at different frequencies simultaneously. Every male produces a bivocal call, two overlapping tones, asynchronous, layered, creating a harmonic fingerprint as individual as a human face. The female's brain is tuned to that specific combination. She walks into the chaos of the colony, into the deafening chorus of hundreds of thousands of males calling at once, and her auditory cortex strips away every frequency that doesn't match. She filters the noise in real time until only one signal remains. She finds him by the sound of his voice. Every time. And here's the part that breaks the story in half. After all of that, the march, the handoff, the 115-day fast, the huddle, the voice, the reunion, most emperor penguins don't stay together. The following season, they'll return to the colony, and the majority will pair with someone new. Not because the bond failed, not because the partnership was weak. The logistics of arriving at different times in a colony of hundreds of thousands, on a featureless sheet of ice with no landmarks, simply make reconnection impractical. They give everything they have to one partner, for one season, with an intensity that would break most animals. And then they start over. Different partner. Same devotion. Same sacrifice. Same 115 days in the dark. The loyalty isn't to a lifetime. It's to the promise. And the promise resets every winter. Albatross, the symbol of eternal, love spends 90% of its life completely alone. The albatross, Diomedate, is the largest flying bird on Earth. A wandering albatross can stretch its wings to over 11 feet, wider than most cars are long, and ride ocean winds for hours without flapping once. It can circle the entire planet in 46 days. It sleeps on the wing. It drinks salt water. It crosses oceans the way most birds cross a park. And for the vast majority of its life, it does all of this in total isolation, skimming the surface of the most violent seas on the planet months at a time, without seeing another living albatross. And yet, every year, it comes back. It navigates thousands of miles of featureless ocean. No landmarks, no coastlines, no visual reference points of any kind, and lands on the exact same square meter of volcanic rock where its partner is waiting. Not the same island, not the same beach, the same patch of dirt, the same nest. Year after year after year, for decades. The navigation system that makes this possible operates on a scale that borders on science fiction. The albatross brain reads the Earth's magnetic field, not vaguely, not approximately. It reads it with the spatial precision of a GPS satellite, processing magnetic inclination and declination to plot a course across millions of miles of open water. Scientists call it magnetoreception, and while several bird species have it, no one uses it like the albatross. They're not flying home. They're locking onto a coordinate and refusing to deviate until they're standing on it. But finding the island is only half the problem. The other half is making sure the person you find there still recognizes you. Albatrosses don't hatch knowing how to greet a partner. The courtship dance, the elaborate sequence of bill clacking, head bobbing, wing spreading, and synchronized sky pointing that mated pairs perform when they reunite, takes years to develop. Young albatrosses spend the first several years of their adult lives practicing. They stand in groups on breeding islands and rehearse, clumsily with strangers. They try different moves. They test different sequences. They fail. They try again with someone else. The process looks awkward because it is awkward. They're not performing instinct. They're composing. Eventually, two birds find a sequence that clicks. A specific combination of gestures that works between them and only them. A choreography that functions like a handshake designed by two people who are going to use it for the next 50 years. Once that dance is locked in, it becomes their signature. No other pair on the island does it exactly the same way. When they reunite after months apart, the dance is how they confirm identity. It's not "I found an albatross," it's "I found you." The divorce rate among albatrosses is below 1%. Pairs routinely stay together for 40, 50, 60 years. The most famous albatross alive, a Laysan albatross named Wisdom, was banded on Midway Atoll in 1956. She's over 73 years old. She has outlived the scientist who first tagged her. She has survived tsunamis, hurricanes, and the slow ecological collapse of her habitat. And for decades, she flew the equivalent distance of the Earth to the Moon and back, cumulative, across her lifetime, to land on the same small circle of Pacific sand and find her partner, a Kiakamai, waiting in the exact spot where she left him, 73 years old. Still laying eggs, still dancing, but the bond isn't unbreakable, and the thing that breaks it has nothing to do with the birds. A study published in 2021 documented a phenomenon researchers named climate divorce. As ocean temperatures rise, the fish that albatrosses eat migrate deeper and farther from shore. The birds have to fly longer distances to feed. The extra effort spikes their cortisol, the stress hormone, to abnormal levels. When a male arrives at the nest late, exhausted and running on fumes, the female reads the elevated cortisol the way she reads everything else about him. Biologically, her system interprets the stress as a flaw in the partner, not a flaw in the ocean. She doesn't know the water got warmer. She doesn't know the fish moved. All she knows is that he showed up in worse shape than last year, and her body tells her that means something is wrong with him. So she leaves. She finds someone else. Unions that lasted decades dissolve in a single season because the ocean heated up half a degree. The birds didn't change. The planet did. Shingleback skink, a reptile that grieves. That sentence shouldn't work. Everything we think we know about reptiles says it shouldn't. Reptiles are cold-blooded in every sense. Metabolic, behavioral, emotional. They lay eggs in the sand and walk away. They don't bond. They don't attach. They don't care. That's the textbook. That's what herpetology has taught for a century. The shingleback skink, Tiliqua rugosa, didn't read the textbook. This is a stocky, slow-moving Australian lizard covered in thick, overlapping scales that look like roof shingles, hence the name. It lives in the outback, one of the most punishing landscapes on Earth. Blazing sun, minimal water, predators in every direction. For about 10 months of every year, each shingleback lives alone, buried in sand or wedged under a rock, surviving the heat in solitary stillness. It's a reptile doing exactly what reptiles are supposed to do. Then spring arrives, and the lizard starts walking. It emerges from its hiding spot and begins a slow, deliberate march across the desert floor. It walks for miles, under scorching sun, past hawks circling overhead, past every other available shingleback it encounters. Males, females, doesn't matter. It ignores all of them. It has one destination, one specific bush, in one specific patch of scrub, where one specific individual is waiting. The same individual it met last spring, and the spring before that, and the spring before that. Telemetry studies using microchip implants tracked pairs in South Australia returning to each other for up to 27 consecutive springs. 27 years. That's the entire biological lifespan of the animal. Some of these pairs spent literally every reproductive season of their adult lives finding the same partner across miles of featureless desert. The navigation tool is the tongue. The shingleback's fat, dark blue tongue houses a Jacobson's organ, a chemical analysis system that reads molecular traces the way a forensic lab reads fingerprints. The lizard licks the ground, the rocks, the low branches. It captures microscopic traces of skin oils, hormones, and pheromones left behind by other skinks. And somewhere in that tiny reptilian brain, it stores the unique chemical signature of one specific partner. It remembers the taste of her, and it follows that taste across the desert like a bloodhound on a scent trail, ignoring every shortcut, every easier option, every available alternative until it arrives at the exact spot where she's waiting. The ecologist who proved all of this spent 30 years in the Australian outback tracking these lizards with radio tags. 30 years of data, and his most devastating finding had nothing to do with fidelity. It had to do with loss. One of his monitored pairs was crossing a highway in the outback. The female was struck by a vehicle. The male was on the other side of the road. The survival instinct of any reptile, the most basic, ancient, hardwired program in the vertebrate brain, is to flee from danger. Get to cover. Get under a rock. Get away from the open ground where you're visible and vulnerable. The male didn't move. He walked to where she was lying on the hot asphalt and sat down next to her. For 3 days, in direct sun, on a road surface hot enough to cook skin, he stayed beside her, motionless, exposed to traffic and heat and everything that should have driven him underground, and periodically extended his blue tongue to touch her scales. Gently, repeatedly, the way he'd touched her every spring for decades. He was waiting for her to get up. 3 days. A cold-blooded animal, on burning pavement, touching a partner who couldn't respond. The herpetology textbook says reptiles don't attach. The shingleback didn't read it, and it doesn't seem to care. It weighs about 12 pounds. It stands barely over a foot tall. Its legs are roughly the width of a pencil, and its eyes are so enormous relative to its skull that it looks like a cartoon drawn by someone who didn't understand proportions. The Kirk's dik-dik. Madokwakirki is one of the smallest antelopes in Africa. It doesn't have horns worth mentioning. It can't outrun a cheetah. It can't outfight a jackal. It is, by every measurable standard, one of the most defenseless mammals on the savanna. Everything eats it. Eagles, leopards, pythons, wild dogs. The list of animals that consider the dik-dik a convenient meal is longer than the dik-dik itself. The standard survival strategy for small, vulnerable herbivores is the herd. Join a crowd. Use numbers. When a predator charges, scatter in every direction and hope it chases someone else. Statistically, the bigger the group, the lower your individual chance of being the unlucky one. Zebras do it. Wildebeest do it. Gazelles do it. It works. It's math. The dik-dik rejected the math. Instead of joining a herd of hundreds, a dik-dik lives in a territory of 2. 1 male, 1 female. No group, no herd, no safety in numbers. Just 2 tiny animals, alone on the African plains, surrounded by every predator that continent has to offer, betting their survival on each other instead of on probability. They spend an estimated 64% of their waking life within 5 meters of each other. That's not a casual proximity. That's a physical tether. The male follows the female everywhere, all day, in a patrol pattern so obsessive that researchers initially mistook it for aggression. Wherever she walks, wherever she rests, wherever she leaves a scent mark, he's right behind her. And the moment she deposits any trace of her presence on the ground, urine, sweat, glandular secretions, he rushes to the spot, scrapes the earth with his hooves, and covers her mark with his own. It's called overmarking, and the purpose is erasure. He's not adding his scent to hers. He's replacing it, deleting her chemical footprint from the landscape and substituting his own, so that any predator or rival tracking smells through the grass finds him instead of her. He turns himself into a decoy by smell alone, painting himself over her existence so thoroughly that to a nose scanning the savanna, she doesn't exist. Only he does. Both partners carry a preorbital gland, a conspicuous dark opening in front of each eye that produces a thick, tar-like resin with a sharp, pungent smell. During bonding rituals, the pair presses their faces together, gland to gland, mixing their secretions into a shared chemical compound. Then they walk through their territory and dab the resin on twigs and grass stems, marking the borders of their tiny kingdom with a scent that belongs to neither one individually. It's a fused identity, a chemical marriage certificate painted across the bushes, and when the worst comes, when a leopard drops from a branch in the dark and locks its eyes on the female, the male doesn't run. Guides in the Serengeti have witnessed it. The female is grazing, unaware. The predator is closing. The male spots the threat, and instead of freezing, instead of bolting for cover in the opposite direction, instead of doing the single thing that every survival instinct in his body is screaming at him to do, he breaks cover. He leaps into the open grass. He emits a sharp, piercing alarm call that shatters the night, and he sprints directly away from her in the opposite direction as fast as his pencil-thin legs will carry him, making himself as visible and loud as a 12-pound animal can possibly be. He offers himself. He becomes the bright, noisy, obvious target so that the predator's attention locks onto him instead of her. And she vanishes into the dark while the leopard chases the thing that chose to be seen. 12 pounds of antelope, running straight at a predator's attention. Because the alternative was watching from behind a bush. Gray wolf, there is no such thing as an alpha wolf. The term was coined in 1947 by a researcher studying captive wolves, crammed into artificial packs made of strangers, animals, with no family connection, no shared history, no social structure, forced into proximity and left to sort out dominance through aggression. The hierarchy that emerged was brutal, mechanical, and completely artificial. The scientist who coined the term spent the rest of his career trying to retract it. He published corrections. He gave lectures. He wrote that the concept was fundamentally wrong, that it described a prison dynamic, not a natural one. Nobody listened. The word alpha became folklore, and the wolf has been paying for it ever since. In the wild, a wolf pack, Canis lupus, is not a hierarchy of dominance. It's a family, a mated pair and their offspring. That's it. The alpha male is a father. The alpha female is a mother. The subordinate wolves are their children from this year and last year, staying close to help raise the next litter. The structure isn't built on fear. It's built on the same thing that holds together any functional family: cooperation, memory, and an unreasonable amount of patience with the younger generation. The pair at the center of it all, the parents, are monogamous in a way that reshapes the behavior of every wolf around them. In a pack of 10 or 15 animals, only one pair breeds. The rest voluntarily suppress their own reproductive drive to help raise their parents' pups. Older siblings babysit. They bring food to the den. They stand guard while the mother sleeps. They do this without coercion, without incentive, without any genetic payoff of their own. They do it because that's what this family does. The bond between the mated pair is maintained through a system so subtle that it took hormonal analysis of field samples to detect it. Wolves carry a vomeronasal organ, a sensory structure in the nasal cavity that reads volatile chemical compounds released by the skin. When a bonded pair presses their muzzles together, which they do daily repeatedly, in a behavior that looks like simple affection, the brain captures the chemical profile of the partner and links it directly to the amygdala's memory centers. Happy associations, safe associations. The smell of the partner becomes fused with every positive experience the wolf has ever had. It creates what researchers call an olfactory fingerprint of the soulmate, and the wolf carries it everywhere. Studies in Yellowstone National Park measured glucocorticoid levels, stress hormones, in the feces of wolves during high-pressure events. Encounters with grizzlies, territorial conflicts, chases. The data revealed a phenomenon called social buffering. when the bonded partner was physically nearby, close enough to make body contact, close enough to press a flank against a flank, the wolf's entire hormonal stress response was suppressed. Not reduced, suppressed. The cortisol spike that should have flooded the bloodstream simply didn't happen. The partner's physical presence acted as a chemical off switch for panic, a biological sedative delivered through proximity and touch. The partner is, in measurable physiological terms, a drug that prevents fear. And when the drug is gone, the system crashes. In the records of Yellowstone, there was a wolf designated 21. He was the most dominant male in the park's history, enormous, undefeated in every territorial challenge, a physical force that no rival wolf could match. But the rangers who tracked him daily knew something that the legend didn't capture. 21 was soft. He played with the pups by lying on his back and letting them win. He walked behind his partner, the female known as 42, and let her lead. He deferred to her in every social interaction that didn't involve a direct physical threat to the family. In 2004, 42 was taken by a rival pack. 21 found her. He stood over what was left. And then the most powerful wolf in Yellowstone did something that no data model could have predicted. He stopped. He left the pack. He walked alone, slowly, through the snow, to a clearing in the valley where the two of them used to sleep together during the summers. And he lay down. Weeks later, rangers found him in that clearing. There was nothing physically wrong with him. No injuries, no disease, no signs of a fight. His body had simply stopped. The biologists at Yellowstone don't use clinical language for what happened. They don't have to. Everyone who watched him walk away from the pack already knew. He went to the place where she used to be, and he didn't come back. Black vulture, 0%, again. We saw that number before with the TT monkeys and the owl monkeys. Tiny, adorable primates with enormous eyes and gentle hands. Animals you'd expect to be faithful. Animals that look the part. The black vulture, Corygyps atratus, does not look the part. It's bald, its head is wrinkled, dark gray, and covered in skin that looks like it was left out in the rain for a decade. It eats things that have been sitting on the side of the road for 3 days. It vomits on its own feet to cool down. It is, by any conventional aesthetic standard, one of the least romantic creatures walking the planet. And yet, when modern genetics ran full paternity analyses on vulture populations, testing every chick, mapping every family line, checking for any trace of outside reproduction, the result was the same number that showed up in those cute little monkeys. 0. Across every population tested, not a single chick fathered by anyone outside the pair bond. The animal that eats roadside remains has stricter family values than most primates, and they enforce those values. Aggressively. Black vultures don't just practice fidelity, they police it. If a mated male is observed attempting to court an outside female, the response from the community is immediate and physical. Neighboring pairs, bonded vultures with no direct genetic stake in the situation, descend on the offender in a coordinated group. They chase him, they peck him, they drive him through the air in what field researchers have described as a communal shaming event, harassing the offending bird until he retreats back to his mate. The neighbors aren't protecting their own relationships, they're protecting the institution. One of the most respected ornithologists studying this species watched it happen in real time. A young male tried performing a courtship display for a single female while his mate observed from the ground. Within minutes, the surrounding bonded pairs mobilized. The group chased the male across the canopy, struck him repeatedly, and forced him back to his original partner's side. He stayed there. The mechanism that holds the pair together day to day is hidden in the one feature everyone finds repulsive, the bare head. That wrinkled, featherless skin isn't just ugly, it's a high-resolution emotional display. Blood flow beneath the surface shifts visibly in response to internal states. The skin flushes dark red during arousal and affection. It pales to ashen gray during stress or fear. The partner reads those shifts constantly, passively, the way you'd read someone's facial expressions across a dinner table. The bald head is a mood ring made of skin, and the grooming, the way they show care, is as strange as everything else about them. Vultures wade through bacteria that would hospitalize a human. Their daily meals are a biohazard. So when the male wants to clean his partner's neck and head, the areas she can't reach herself, he doesn't use gentle preening the way a songbird would. He uses his stomach acid. The gastric fluid of a black vulture is among the most corrosive substances in the animal kingdom, acidic enough to dissolve bone, potent enough to neutralize anthrax and rabies on contact. He regurgitates a small amount and carefully applies it to her skin with his beak. It looks revolting. It functions as an antibacterial shield. He's wrapping her in an invisible layer of protection brewed inside his own body, and the family doesn't end at the nest. Researchers documented a behavior almost unheard of in birds: multi-generational visitation. When young vultures grow up, pair off, and establish territories of their own, sometimes miles away from where they were raised, they continue making regular trips back to their aging parents. They show up at the old feeding sites. They share regurgitated food with their elderly mother and father, supplementing the older bird's declining ability to compete for meals. They don't have to. There's no genetic incentive. The parents can't offer them anything in return. They visit anyway. Most primates don't do that. French angelfish, 99% of their waking life, within inches of each other. That's the number marine observers have recorded for the French angelfish, Pomacanthus peru. Two flat, elegant fish, striped in black and gold, drifting through Caribbean reefs like paired shadows. They forage together. They patrol together. They rest together. They don't separate. Not for hours, not for errands, not for any reason that anyone watching them has ever been able to identify. They are, for all practical purposes, a single organism that happens to have two bodies. In an ocean built on anonymity, where most fish reproduce by releasing cells into open water and never seeing their offspring, never recognizing a mate, never forming any bond that lasts beyond a single spawning event. The French angelfish chose the opposite. One partner, one territory, every day, for life. When a threat arrives, a larger fish encroaching on their patch of reef, a predator scanning the coral, they don't flee separately. They press belly to belly, align their bodies perfectly, and begin spinning. Fast. A tight, synchronized circle, striped bodies blurring into a single rotating shape that looks, from a distance, like something much larger and much more dangerous than two small reef fish. The carousel illusion works because their movement is so precisely matched that predators can't parse where one body ends and the other begins. They become a single, confusing, intimidating visual signal. A two-headed dragon made of coordination and trust. The mechanism behind that coordination is wired into their skin. Every fish has a lateral line, a row of pressure-sensitive channels running down each side of the body that detects water movement. It's a basic navigational tool. But in French angelfish that have spent years swimming inches apart, the lateral line system of each fish becomes calibrated to the specific hydrodynamic signature of the other. They learn the exact pressure waves their partner's body creates while moving through water. They read those waves the way a musician reads a bandmate's breathing before a note. And the result is a biological wireless connection, a tactile radar tuned exclusively to one other body in the ocean. They don't need to see each other to swim in perfect unison. They feel each other through the water itself. Behavioral researchers observed what they've called post-conflict affiliation in these fish. After a confrontation with a predator, after the spinning, after the threat retreats, after the adrenaline of the encounter fades, both fish immediately converge. They press their faces together. They brush their fins along the other's body. They rub their mouths gently against each other's lips in what the scientific papers carefully describe as affiliative tactile contact, and what anyone watching would simply call kissing. And the monitor showed it works. Cortisol levels plummet within seconds of contact. The stress drains out of them through touch, the same way it does in primates, the same way it does in humans. The footage that captures who they really are didn't come from a laboratory. It came from a documentary crew diving in the Caribbean. A cameraman accidentally startled a female, pushing her against the coral. The male, a fish the size of a dinner plate, outweighed by the diver by a factor of several hundred, didn't hide. He turned around. He swam directly at the diver's face, and he rammed the camera lens, repeatedly, head-butting the glass with every ounce of force a 12-inch fish could generate, over and over, until the diver backed away. a fish the size of your hand, charging a mammal the size of a refrigerator, because the refrigerator got too close to his partner. Common raven. Edgar Allan Poe got it wrong. The common raven, Corvus corax, has spent centuries trapped inside a reputation it didn't earn. The bird of omens, the harbinger, the black shape sitting on the bare branch while the fog rolls in. Human folklore painted the raven as the mascot of gloom, and the image stuck so well that most people feel a small involuntary chill when a raven lands nearby. The bird is dark. The bird is large. The bird eats things that no longer move. Therefore, the bird must be sinister. The bird is, in fact, one of the most emotionally sophisticated, playful, and deeply romantic animals ever documented by behavioral science. Ravens pair for life, and life for a raven can stretch past 40 years, but they don't rush into it. Young ravens leave the nest and spend years drifting through the social landscape in what ornithologists call vagrant flocks, roaming gangs of unpaired juveniles that travel together, compete, play, and test each other's intelligence in real time. A raven looking for a mate isn't scanning for the biggest body or the brightest feather. It's scanning for a mind that matches. The courtship evaluation period lasts 3 to 4 full years. 3 to 4 years of watching, testing, probing, before a raven commits to a bond that will last the rest of its life. The communication system they build once they've paired is unlike anything else in the bird world. Ravens have one of the most complex vocal repertoires of any non-human animal. A huge range of clicks, knocks, rasps, and tonal calls that they can modulate, combine, and alter. Bonded pairs take this further. They develop private dialects. Specific calls that only the two of them use, invented over time, refined through repetition, carrying meanings that no other raven in the territory can decode. Nicknames, inside jokes, a private frequency in a crowded forest. The neural architecture that makes this possible sits in an enlarged region of the brain called the nidopallium, a structure linked to what cognitive scientists call theory of mind. Ravens can infer what another individual is thinking. They can predict behavior. They can read emotional states from body language alone. When one partner is distressed, the other doesn't need a call to know it. It watches. It reads the posture, the wing position, the head angle, and it responds, not with alarm, but with proximity. It moves closer. It sits next to the distressed bird. It preens the neck feathers. It waits. But the behavior that truly separates ravens from every other bird, the one that made researchers stop and reconsider what these animals are, is what they do with objects. Scientists documenting wild raven pairs captured something extraordinary on camera. A raven found a small, smooth pebble, brightly colored, unusual in shape. It picked it up carefully in its beak, flew to where its partner was perched, and held it out. Not to feed her, not to offer it as nesting material, not to place it in her beak. It simply held the pebble in front of her at a slight angle and waited while she looked at it. It was showing her something it thought was beautiful. This behavior, called deictic gesturing, was previously believed to exist only in humans and great apes. The ability to hold an object up, not to use it, not to trade it, but to share the experience of looking at it, to say, without words, "Look at this, isn't it incredible?" requires a level of abstract thought so advanced that entire branches of cognitive science were built on the assumption that only primates could do it. A bird did it, with a pebble, for its wife. And then there's the play. The scientist who devoted his life to understanding ravens, a German-American biologist working in the brutal winters of Maine, made an observation one frozen morning that crystallized everything. He found a bonded pair on the roof of a snow-covered barn. They were not foraging. They were not scanning for threats. They were not doing anything that any survival manual would recommend for a bird burning precious calories in sub-zero temperatures. They were sliding. One raven flopped onto its back and slid down the icy roof, making small grunting sounds the entire way. When it reached the edge, it hopped back up to the peak, walked to where its partner was standing, and they both slid down together, side by side, repeatedly, for an extended stretch of time, in freezing wind, burning fat they couldn't afford, Two of the most intelligent birds on the planet played in the snow like children on a toboggan run. No biological function. No reproductive signal. No territorial display. Two geniuses who decided that the best use of a winter morning was laughing on a roof.